How Zara changed the fashion game. Imagine you're on your way to work. You get up, pick up a dress, maybe a blouse, or just a t-shirt and a pair of pants. You have your breakfast, hurry up to your car and get going before it's too late. You pass through a busy intersection, get to the highway, merge, and notice the dazzling view of the city. Surrounded by dozens and dozens of cars, what are the chances that the driver next to you works in the same industry as you? Statistically, not many, unless you work in the fashion industry. From the designing board, the factory to the retail floor, the fashion industry employs 1 out of 6 people on Earth. That might not sound impressive, but add up the total number of employees in the 50 biggest companies in the world and you're still way short. The fashion industry is huge, from live streaming their runways to millions of viewers, to fast shipping new garments all around the world, to paying billions of dollars in celebrity endorsements, or dressing our famed political leaders. They have managed to turn the simple task of putting on something to cover ourselves to a painless, expensive, tedious experience. It wasn't always this way. In ancient Rome, it was only the upper classes, known as the patricians, who had access to the latest trends and luxury garments. The middle and lower classes in society, the plebeians, dressed themselves with worn-out tunics made of reused fabric. Clothing, for everyone but the rich, was neither a luxury nor something to think about. It was a necessity, covering oneself from the imminent danger of winter or public embarrassment. Sometimes it served the purpose of identification. You're part of one group or the other. While the patricians had access to foreign silk, gold luxurious items, or colourful high-quality tunics, the plebeians only had cheap materials to make their clothes out of. The rest of history followed suit. The upper classes adorned themselves with accessories made of gold and silver, while peasants and the lower classes never saw dressing up or wearing costumes particularly beneficial. Even during the Industrial Revolution, fancy dressing wasn't really a thing for the masses. Uniforms were the norms. But today, the average American consumer buys 37 new pieces of clothing every year. Fashion has long reached mainstream and everyone has had their fair share in this vastly saturated market. Now, let's not pretend looking good isn't important. You are constantly being judged by the way you look, so it makes sense that we spend ever-increasing sums of money on clothes. Right now, between 80 and 150 billion garments are produced globally every year. But the average American throws away 81 pounds of clothes every year. We have gone from being a society that sees clothing for its utility to one which spends more than $3 trillion every year, all for the sake of looking good. For that, we can thank one man, one company, and one revolutionary idea. His name is Amancio Ortega. He was born in 1936 in Busdongo de Arbas, a small Spanish locality with less than 30 people. At 14, he dropped out of school to help his mum make ends meet. He started working as a shop hand in the port city of A Coruña. He learned how to sew and started making modifications to the leftover fabrics of the store. Using fabric that would be thrown away, he would design new looks and sell shirts, pants, nightgowns and lingerie to other stores. Eventually, he learned the ins and outs of the industry and became a manager in 1960. 12 years later, he was ready to open his own store, called Confecciones Goa, in Galicia. Ortega and his wife, Rosalia Mera, would design the looks and run the business. They gathered a few local women to sew cheap fabrics into affordable, beautiful pieces. They quickly added more high-fashion looks to their inventory by replicating popular outfits, introducing cheap knockoffs of very expensive garments to the Spanish scene. After gaining notoriety, they gathered a small fund for the company and sold equity to the Ortega family. In due course, Ortega understood that bringing fashionable styles that were affordable was much needed on the market. Consumers needed high-end, fashionable clothes at fair prices. So in 1975, Ortega used his savings to establish a new store called Zorba in A Coruña. Zorba was a much bigger store than Confecciones Goa, but Ortega wanted to go even bigger. They changed the name from Zorba to Zara amidst a dispute with a local bar which was also called Zorba. Zara was a hit. Within the years that followed, Zara opened more stores in Galicia. However, Expanding production is hard. You have to hire workers, establish rules and standards, coordinate distribution, pay for shipping, centralize, follow federal rules and regulations, and please a wider range of customers with many different needs. That's why over 99% of America's businesses are small businesses, and 88% of all employers have fewer than 20 employees. Additionally, the internet wasn't invented yet and computers were slow, expensive, and not at all available in Spain. If Ortega wanted to expand and provide consumers with affordable, fashionable styles, he would have to change Zara's business model entirely. In 1980, Ortega changed the manufacturing and distribution processes to reduce the costs of making his designs. The goal was to shorten the time it took for a new look to go from drawing to store. By 1983, Ortega had opened 8 other stores in Spain. To expand even further, he built a logistics center in Arteixo. The brand new state-of-the-art monument was the size of 2 football fields. Here, clothes could be made at much larger volumes. Ortega had managed to create the first mass production of fashionable clothes in history. He enjoyed the economies of scales his business provided, passing on savings to consumers and huge profits for himself and his family. Eventually, Zara wanted to target the untapped market of the new trends, what Ortega called the instant fashions, looks that consumers wanted, but producers didn't offer because of how quickly they would go away. Think about it this way: how could a company make money from a style or a trend which might only be around for a year if it takes an entire year to design, manufacture, distribute, and sell these looks? Ortega used his experience in shortening production procedures to penetrate this entire segment of the market. He incorporated Zara into Inditex, a holding company for Zara and its manufacturing plants. Inditex then acquired other high street brands that followed Zara's high-end cheap fashion style. These included Pull&Bear, Bourcha, and Stradivarius. Zara adopted the famous Toyota production system called Just in Time. Rather than making a product, setting it aside in warehouses and delivering it, Zara wanted to organize its production run so that every step in the production process happened simultaneously. Rather than pay money on storage and having clothes rest in warehouses, Ortega wanted to deliver its clothes to the customers right after making them. This way, Zara would benefit from consumers' quickly changing preferences in clothing. Stores began to pop out everywhere. In Spain, Zara became the leading fashion brand. And from 1988 to 1993, Zara expanded to Portugal, the US, France, Mexico, Greece, Belgium, and Sweden. Once a small workshop where local women sewed leftover fabric, Zara had become the biggest apparel company in the world. The rise of fast fashion has been apparent. American shoppers are now buying 5 times more clothing than they did in 1980. The volume of clothing we throw away each year has also increased dramatically, from 7 to 14 million tons of waste on clothes in the last 20 years. Now, Inditex operates 7,000 stores worldwide, and Zara has more than 2,000 stores in 96 countries. All of them making fast, trendy, somewhat high-end, relatively affordable clothing. Amancio Ortega went from being a broke 14-year-old dropout working in retail to the 11th richest person in the world. Last year, French fashion house Louis Vuitton spent nearly $5 billion on advertising, roughly a third of its total revenue. Other brands like Balenciaga, Chanel, Dior, Versace, and Prada spend similar amounts of their revenue in marketing and have been increasingly spending more on social media ads. Even in retail, the average company spends 3.5% of its revenue on advertising. Zara spends less than 0.3%. Instead of using its money to advertise, Zara has invested its funds into expanding production and cutting prices. At one point, Zara warehouses were 9 times the size of Amazon's. Zara has used its money to improve its production run from the design stage to the distribution process. Even more impressive is the fact that, unlike Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga, Gucci, or Prada, Zara doesn't try to create trends, it follows them. Zara lets other big brands do the spending on advertising and design and reaps the benefits at the end by using its robust logistical operations framework to create similar products at an increasingly fast rate. They don't try to be first, they only try to be fast. In a way, even though Zara is one of the biggest and most recognizable fashion brands, its business model resembles much more of a retailer's than that of a fashion brand. Instead of investing on design teams, Zara found a way to let the other brands do the work. Zara has also relied on its consumer base. After a popular gown has been seen on the runway, Zara mimics the patterns, colors, and style of the piece into similar garments. Then, the Zara team throws every idea into the table. Every year, 40,000 proposed designs reach Zara's drawing boards. Only 12,000 of them eventually make it to stores. Since these 12,000 garments are already similar to industry favorites at much lower prices, they are expected to do well. While other companies need 6 months to design, create, store, showcase, and sell a piece of clothing, Zara can essentially shorten and combine these processes so that it takes a mere 7 days to get a new look in stores. If a popular design doesn't do well, then because of the cost-saving operations of Zara, it doesn't cost the company much. But because of its rapid response to trends, Zara can expand production for those garments which are best sellers while discontinuing other designs. In a way, Zara has developed a trial and error system in which it can shorten its design process by letting consumers be the decision makers into what they want in stores. In the 80s, Ortega understood that an emerging consumer market in the instant fashions wasn't being supplied by the high-end brands of the time. He understood that many consumers wanted something trendy, fashionable, perhaps a one-time thing. He understood that if he followed this model, Zara clothes weren't going to be used for long. He was right. On average, each piece of clothing will only be worn 7 times before it gets tossed out. Ortega knew that he could cut back on the business's practices which made a product luxurious and focus on the trendy side of the market which had yet to be penetrated. It took advantage of the already existing planned obsolescence in the market and capitalized on it to make Zara the 3rd largest apparel company in the world. Before the 1980s, the concept of fast fashion wasn't even heard on the street. Today, it is the biggest growing segment in the fashion industry. Inditex is the 3rd largest fashion company in the world, making up for nearly 90% of the entire sales in the fast fashion industry. Other brands like H&M are catching up. They're fast, but they were not the first. Right now, the fashion industry is the 3rd largest manufacturer in the world. What was once a necessity has become a style of living to get the latest stuff. We see that with companies like Apple in the tech industry or McDonald's in the fast food industry. These respective players condition their industries to be what they are today. On its part, Zara has not only transformed the fashion industry, it has made it.